The command line is an incredibly powerful tool to take advantage of in development. When you know how to use the command line, you can automate just about anything. This is why tools like Git, Docker, and even .NET are command line first products. In this video, we're going to see how to build a C# application that can call command line applications directly. Now, if you don't know me, my name is Tim Corey, and it's my goal to make learning C# easier. I do that by providing videos here on YouTube multiple times per week. Plus, I have a weekly podcast. I also provide courses on C#, web development, and much more at IamTimCorey.com. The profits from those sales are what pays for the free content here on YouTube, so that everyone can have a great education in C#, not just those who can afford it. Now, in this video, as with most of my videos, I'm going to create some source code. If you want to copy that source code, use the link in the description. All right, let's go over to Visual Studio. This is Visual Studio 2022 Community Edition, in case you're wondering. And we're going to build a simple console application. Now, a console application is something that you can then run from the command line, but that's not the point here. We're going to use the console application to run other commands. So we're going to call things like PowerShell, and we're going to call into things like Docker and Git or anything else we want to do right from our C# application, which means that even though I'm doing a console application here, we could turn this into another type of application. For example, a desktop application like WinForms or WPF, or a web application even, where it would call these command lines on the server, like Blazor Server or MVC or Razor Pages or API. So there's a lot of different flexibility here on where we can do this work. I just want to point that out that we'll be using the console application, but we could do this C# code pretty much anywhere. We can't do it in Blazor WebAssembly or in the new .NET MAUI stuff. That's about it. All right, let's create a new project, console application. We're going to call this, let's call this our CLI demo and our CLI demo app. And we'll put in the temp directory is fine. .NET 6 long-term support. This is a new feature right here I want to point out. If you really don't like top-level statements, meaning the initial file does not have a namespace or class declaration, it's just program.cs and all the code's in there. If you don't like that, you can check this box and go back to the old way of doing things. Personally, I like the new way of doing things. I think that it makes a whole lot of sense to do this way, but there is that option to go back if you really feel like you want to. That would be the check the box here. But we're going to leave it unchecked and hit create. Okay, so once this gets started, we're going to use, let's get rid of our sample code here. We are going to use a third-party library to help us out with this. This third-party library is great. It really makes a lot of this work so simple to do. So I want to point this out. This is the library we're going to use. It's called CLI Wrap, and I'll leave the link for this down in the description. Definitely check it out. Give them a star as well. It's always nice to be appreciated. But we're going to do the install a CLI Wrap from our NuGet package, and then it has a lot of documentation here that can really help you out with how to do just about everything with this very, very simple to use tool. So there's even a video up here that walks you through how to do it as well. So just note that's available to you to use. It's down in the description. So right click on dependencies and say manage NuGet packages. And we're going to install CLI Wrap. And we're going to say install and OK. And now we have that done. What we're going to do is we're going to start playing with this, which means we start with just using CLI Wrap. That will allow us to make calls to this. Okay, we're going to start with the very basics of how to do this, just so we can see it in use. And then from there, we can kind of play around with other things we could do. So let's start off with, actually I'm going to add one more thing. I'm now using CLI wrap.buffered. This makes life a little easier for us. I'll explain what it does. Basically what it does is it adds the ability to capture the input and output more easily. So I've got Docker installed on my machine. Now you may not have Docker installed on your machine, which means this command wouldn't work. But if Docker's installed, let's run a quick Docker command. So var, let's call it Docker results equals await. This is async await, which means you may be wondering where is the async on this method, because this is the top level statement, which means you can't even see the method static void main. Well, by default, it allows now the use of asynchronous code in this file because it is marked as async. So we can put async code in here without having to do anything special to call it inside program.cs. So we're going to say await CLI.wrap. That's the kind of the root of this, the heart of it, Docker. Okay. And then we're going to do something with this. So we could just do execute async, but I'm going to say .with arguments. I'm going to pass in some arguments, and here's what I like to do. Now you can pass in arguments as one big string. Okay, so you could say version. That's my arguments. Cool. But I prefer to pass in an array. All right. So I prefer to say new array and then put inside of the curly braces. I'll move the curly brace down here. That item. And the reason why, because I can just add a comma here and put others and not have to worry about escaping quotes and all the other stuff you have to do. You just kind of throw it in there. It will put multiple versions, make sure the spacing is right and all the rest. So with arguments. Now it's still yelling at me because I'm not actually calling this yet. So it really wants me to do execute async, but I'm going to do execute buffered async. All right. Now, this is where this right here, this using CLI wrap.buffered helps us out, because normally it's just execute async is all we do. But then this Docker results won't have the command line information that I kind of want, which is fine in certain circumstances. So if this was a fire and forget thing, then we wouldn't have to capture necessarily the command line output. Okay, but in this case, I want to capture the command line. Now let me pull up the terminal here so we have some comparison. So I'm going to open up, actually I'll open up a command prompt, and I'm going to say Docker space -- version. That's what we're doing with this command, okay? So this just gives me the version of Docker as installed on my machine. That's all it does. So this is the output of that command. That's all we're really worried about at this point, is getting that value. Okay, so I'm going to run the Docker command. That's this command right here. And then I pass in arguments. That's just, this is the only argument I have right now, but I could pass in multiple if I wanted to. And the results I want to see are this. So I'm going to do execute buffered async, which then I have this Docker results variable. So I can say, let's do a CW for console.writeLine. I'm going to say Docker results dot. And we have a few things, standard output or standard error, standard output, and then we have start time, run time, and a few others. Okay. So if you did not have, if you just did execute, let's just do this, execute async, then when you see this, you will not see the standard error or standard output. You just see start time, run time, exit code, and things like that. So I wanted to have a little bit of addition here with the buffered async so that I can say dot standard output. And this is a string that is the output of that command, which remember is going to be something like this. So let's run this just as it is. And there we go. It's output this right here for me. Now, this extra stuff that actually comes from the console app itself, the C# application. So let's do this. Let's say console.readline at the end. That way we don't get that message, so we can tell what's actually coming from the CLI wrap. So that's this right here. those two lines, which there's a blank line. Notice there's a blank line right here. That's what we're actually capturing. Okay, so we could use this to capture what the output is of a certain command. So we've seen how it works, how to set it up, and how to use it, but let's talk about why this is useful right now. Okay, so with this right here, we're just getting the version just to have something to capture. But imagine for a minute that we had to run some kind of batch process or script of some kind that did some work. We want to capture what work was done or what happened. We could do that using this tool. Now, we don't have to capture the output if we don't want. I prefer to for pretty much everything. I just put it in a database so you can review it later. But let's just say for a minute you want to run a batch process where we created a Docker. We did some work with Docker. Let's say we create a Docker image, and then we create from that a container and spun that container up. We could do all of that with just the arguments. That's what we do on the command line. But instead of running it from the command line, we could run it right inside of our C# application automatically. So we could do this, let's say, every night. Create a new instance of, let's say, our SQL Server, populate the right information, start it up, and set it running every night. That way we have a new version of our database that's refreshed or whatever every single night using this automated C# application. So that's one way to do this. We can even change this. Let's just say, I'll keep the code here so you have it. Let's actually copy all of this, and then we'll comment it all out, and I will paste it back in, but this time I'm going to say git. Git for the source control system, not GET. So let's just say git. And actually git has the same -- version option. So we could run this as well, and we can get the value of git version is 2.36.0.windows.1. So that's what's installed on my machine. But we could do git commands. Maybe we could clone down a repository. Maybe we can do a git pull and a git push every evening. We could do merges, or we could do, check for new things on the server. Whatever we want to do with git, we could do automatically or powered by C#. This means we can even create a Git client of our own using a C# application. Maybe you have some standard things you do with Git that you want to just automate instead of having to remember the commands or try to get some client to do it through 3 or 4 or 5 steps. Well, you could put this right into a C# application, have one button that you push, and it just does this work for you. So lots of cool stuff you could do there using the command line. But let's say maybe you want to do some work with a batch file. Maybe you already have some kind of batch file that you run, but you want to execute it inside of a C# application. No problem, we can do that. So to do that, let's first create a batch file. So let's go over to this directory. It's my D directory, and it's in temp. And I'm going to, let's open the VS Code. VS Code is like the best command line editor. Yes, I trust everything. So I'm going to say new file, and we're going to say demo.bat. Sorry, over here, demo.bat. And in here, we can put a number of commands. A .bat file is just a batch of commands from your command prompt. So you could say a number of things. We could say dir, that gives you a directory. We could, and let's just do that, just give me a directory. Now, for you, you'd probably do something else like cleaning things up or moving files around, deleting files, archiving files, whatever you want to do. But for us, we're just going to run dir. That's it. Now, that's already saved, so let's move us off the screen, and we're going to copy this again. I'll comment it out, and we're going to say CMD results this time. And what we're going to do here is a little bit different, because I'm going to say d:/temp/demo.bat. That's going to run that batch file. I have to put the @ symbol in front, which indicates this is a string literal. so that the slashes aren't treated as an escape character. Otherwise, we could do is put 2 slashes, but I find that to be ugly. Now, we don't want to have these command options here, the arguments, so we can just get rid of that. However, well, let's just execute that. Let's just execute just this first. So let's run this. And here is what it captured. It captured all this information about our command. So our command ran, and it ran, notice, in the ctemp CLI demo, or CLI demo app, CLI demo, bin, debug, or net 6.0, and then here's the files in that directory and how big they are. So that's where it ran this command, but maybe that's not exactly what I wanted to have happen. Maybe I wanted to run somewhere else. No problem. We can say dot with working directory, and we'll put the app symbol for the string literal. We can say d:/temp. So the place where the demo file is running, which will do a directory on that file, not on, or that folder, not somewhere else. Let's run this again. And I can see that it ran the directory command on just the d:/temp directory. And we have our demo.bat file, and then the 2 options for this directory and go up 1 directory. Okay, so that's how you run with command line arguments. Now imagine for a minute that I had some kind of error inside my batch file. Maybe there's some kind of problem where I'm trying to do some work and it's not happening or it's not working correctly. So let's bring our command here, and we're going to say del testing.123. And that's going to delete the testing.123 file from the location where the batch file is called. Do you know what file that is? Well, it doesn't exist. So it's going to cause an error. So if we were to run this, let's just bring our command line up here. So let's do a change directory to dtemp. Whoops, I have to do a d: first. Now I'm in the temp directory of D. There we go. If I do a directory here, cool, that works. But if I do a del testing.123, it says I could not find that file. That's an error. Something went wrong. It didn't work the way I expected it to. All right. So let's run this command. Now we have both of these commands in this batch file. All right. So let's run this command now, and we're going to get this. So we have the directory call, and that worked just fine. The next line is, hey, call delete testing.123, and then nothing. What's the problem here? Why isn't it showing us the rest of the command? Well, that's because we're capturing the standard output. But if we capture the standard error and we run this, we'll see could not find d:/temp/testing.123. It captures just the error. So this way we can capture the standard output and see what, the happy stuff that did work. We can also capture the errors if there are any. So we can check that standard error to see if there's anything in there that we need to know about. That allows us to verify that our scripts ran correctly. Now that's great, but you may not ever use batch files. You probably are more familiar with PowerShell if you're doing anything with, scripting, especially when it comes to servers or working with systems. So PowerShell is a really powerful set of tools that you can do a lot with inside of your computer. So let's talk about running PowerShell. That's a really cool thing to do. So let's copy this, we're going to comment it out, and let's see a demo of running PowerShell. I'll say PowerShell results here, like so. And we're not going to run this command. We're just going to run PowerShell itself, because PowerShell is actually something you can execute. You can say PowerShell and then execute a command. So what do we want to execute? Well, we're going to execute a script of some kind. So let's create one. So we're going to say new file, and we'll say demo.ps1 for a PowerShell file. And what we're going to do here is we're going to just write some contents to the directory. Actually, not in the directory, we're just going to write it right to the output. Okay, so we're going to say write-host hello world. And that's a really simple PowerShell command. Now, PowerShell you can do a ton of stuff with where you can actually do querying. So you can, instead of saying directory, you can say directory and then let's grab just the name and the extension and the size of the file. We can pipe all of that, means like do a for each on those things and filter it down, all the rest. Really cool stuff you can do with PowerShell, but let's just write to the host. Now, again, if we want to see this actually work, here is my PowerShell tab open in terminal. And I can just say write host hello world and see that that's what it does. Just writes out hello world. Okay, just to demonstrate we are doing some kind of work. Now, just so you know, like dir still works. Looks a little different, okay? But it still works. You can do a lot with that. But, write host just writes out that value. So that's what we're going to do with demo.ps1. So we're going to say in the temp directory, I'm going to say dot with arguments. I'm going to say new array of arguments. And inside here, we're going to say, I'm going to give it the full path, just so we have it. So dtemp /demo.ps1. That's the commit. That's the PowerShell script to run. Okay, and we're going to execute this buffered async, and we're going to grab not the standard error, but the standard output. If we run this, it captures hello world. So we have now executed our PowerShell script. So as you can see, we can call things directly, such as Docker or Git. Don't forget .NET is also a command line tool you can run. So we can do things like creating whole new projects and setting up new things in projects, all automatically from another C# application. So you can run Docker, Git, PowerShell, .NET, and so much more inside of a C# application. We can script all of this and then have it execute whenever we want using our C# application. We can create our own GUIs for some of these tools where maybe you've found, there's certain things lacking, or your process just doesn't line up with a standard GUI tool. One of the things that I often notice is that with Docker, I have certain things I like to do. Well, I could create a little GUI that would do things like clean up all of the images I'm not using anymore, or make sure that I've shut down all the images that are running and clear everything out, or something like that. We can create one button that does all of that in one using this CLI wrap. So there's lots of really great power you have accessible here. And don't forget that if we actually go to the CLI demo and we go to Open Folder in File Explorer, and then go to bin debug net 6.0 CLI demo.exe. That actually creates an executable file, this console application does, that we can then run from a C# application. So it's kind of Inception-like. We could create a C# application that executes another C# application and even passes in arguments to it so that we can automate a lot of stuff and call it automatically. So there's a lot you can do with a CLI wrap tool, and it really opens the doors to as much automation as you want to do. You can create your own continuous integration, continuous deployment process right inside of a C# application if you wanted to do that. So if you want to keep things in-house, you don't want to go out to like GitHub Actions or Azure DevOps or something like that, well, you could do it in-house using a tool like this and create all of your logic in C#, which you already know. Or you can mix it with other things as well, like PowerShell or batch commands or whatever else. So lots of stuff you can do here, but I wanted to show you this because I wanted to kind of open your eyes to the possibilities of how you can do more with automation inside of C#. The opportunities here are pretty much endless. And this is the reason why most things anymore have a command line option, especially a command line first option. People often ask me, why should you ever learn Git command line? Because there's always great Git GUIs. Well, yes, there are, but I've often found that they fall down at times. In fact, I did a full course on Git, and when I was showing off different GUIs, one of the GUIs failed to work fully. It had an error. And I'm like, no problem. We've already learned how to complete this. We dropped into the command line and just completed the action. So knowing how to use the command line is really powerful because those GUIs are actually built on top of the command line. But more than that, if you want to do anything with automation, where a tool calls these products, you have to have a command line version. This is why we have those command line versions, because we want continuous integration. We want continuous deployment. We want to have automated testing. We want to have all these things so that we can make our lives easier, make our jobs go by faster, get things done more quickly. The way to do that is to automate as much as possible. And this is a great tool for helping us get there. Okay, so I would love for you to go visit this site, give him a star, tell him thank you for his work for the community. This tool is awesome. If you have anything to do with command line or want to practice more, check this tool out. It makes life so much easier. And I just scratched the surface of everything that can be done in the command line from a C# application. Thanks for watching. If you have any comments, leave them down below. Let me know what you think. And as always, I am Tim Corey.